Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Fly the Coop. I am so excited to have Sharry Schmid back. She is the acting president of Edina Realty. And I always enjoy interviewing you, Sharry, because you have such beautiful insight on the state of the market. And I'm very excited to hear what you have to say today. So let's delve right in, Sharry.
Sounds good. I'm excited to be here again. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for being here. I know you're a busy woman. Trying to get you on the show is always a challenge with the calendar for sure.
Well,
So you run the fund team meetings for the entire company. So many of you don't know that Edina Realty is one of the largest individual brokers left in the United States. How many agents are you operating right now, Sharry?
we're right around 2,300 agents,
Isn't that
independent.
impressive?
It
Yeah.
is impressive. Yeah, it's a great team.
And in your opinion, as you're running, because you run the regions and you have meetings weekly, which I love hearing the intel on that. What is your opinion right now on the energy in what I consider a very vibrant market?
Overall, I would say energy is up and picking up a lot of momentum. The market was slow to get started, and I know we'll get into that here this morning. It was slow in our area to get started, but it definitely is taken off. So there's
Yeah.
great energy out there.
So what do you attribute the slow start to? I have some thoughts. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of things happening. Our long winters don't help. I know we blame a lot on it, but it was a long winter. It was
It
tough.
was. It
Yeah, and
was.
so I think that in combination with, what's happening in the market, people waiting to see, and when it's cold and you've got a little question around market conditions anyway, it's easy to sit back and wait. But as soon as we started to see things literally thaw, uh, in and around our geographic footprint, we started to see that momentum pick up and people coming out, listing their homes, and a lot of buyer demand as well.
Yeah. So I know, energy in, energy out. So I know with our team specifically, we were able to stay really steady. Now, I would say our energy level was really high, and we're seeing the outcome now moving into second quarter and certainly third quarter. I would say we were fully entrenched in the market. We are doing a lot of funnel building and educating and counseling first quarter. And the year is going to prove to be what I think a production year across the board for people. That's really going to be more late started. And we're going to see a really vibrant market all the way through the end of the year. Personally, I don't feel the rates have affected our ecosystem personally. What are your thoughts? I just love to hear what you think about that.
Yeah, I think interest rates, obviously they're a factor because that impacts where your payment's going to be. But with that, having an expert or a team like yours to advise on, okay, Cari, and here's what I can afford in
Yeah,
my monthly payments. Now help me go find that
right.
opportunity. And there are a ton of opportunities out there to put those pieces together. And I think that's kind of the fundamental difference in how buyers are looking and shopping. Initially, about a year ago, when interest rates spiked and unprecedented, we had not seen that kind of spike and that quickly.
Right.
I definitely paused the market, but all that demand and people that were ready to go, you're right. They're coming back to the market and saying, you know what, my life needs to move on. I'm not
Right.
going to stay stuck and not move forward because of an interest rate.
Well, and I think when they say, what is it, 80% of the market now in terms of the play, in terms of the people selling real estate, now no age, defined in that, I have been in the business for 5 years or less.
Mhm.
So they don't know what normal used to be. How are you educating through that? Because this is actually a normal market, this rate.
And that's what we continue to talk to the market about, whether that's realtors that have been in the market for 5 years or less, or buyers and sellers who maybe haven't sold or bought for a while or forgot what
Yeah.
normal looks
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
But to your point, we really do need to take out the last 3 to 4 years and that COVID craze and
Hmm.
low interest rates. And when you look at the broader spectrum, And interestingly enough, when you look at interest rates and chart that out over the last 20 plus years, we're still at historically low
I
levels
know.
of interest rates. And that's the other thing for people to keep in mind, that
Absolutely.
yeah, and when I hear people say, well, I'm going to wait for interest rates to go back down, what they have to realize is nobody can say with 100% certainty, but I can say with about 90% certainty, we aren't going to see 3% interest rates again. And
No, I
so
agree.
anyone listening and saying, I'm going to wait for that interest rate to come back, you
That's not
potentially be
happening.
waiting a really long time. And in the meantime, do you really want to put life on hold and your dreams and your aspirations and goals for what you're looking for?
Absolutely. I agree. I mean, it's all about the lifestyle and the experience, right? And everybody needs a home. That's what I always say. So let's reverse engineer what that looks like. And the cost to do business to live the life you want, the creme brulee. I always say, what's the creme brulee and how can we get you there? And what's the cost to do business, and change the mindset around the thinking on that. Coming off of an unreasonable, what I call an unreasonable rate experience that we likely will never see again. So, housing units, I'm going to talk nationally because I know you pay attention to the numbers like I do, Sharry, and what's happening locally in terms of this continuation of inventory or lack of, which is part of the issue, right? Supply and demand. What is your take for, we're going to talk about Minnesota right now in the Twin Cities, because
Yep.
you have, many maybe don't know that Sharry has a very deep knowledge level and connection with the building and construction and development community in our city. That's your background. So housing units, we've been notoriously low for a decade now, and we're still trying to catch up. How do you see that shaking out as we become, Sharry, more of a magnet in my mind with the relocation market? We're seeing an infill or an increase in populace here. We're becoming attractive down the middle corridor of the country, as we both know,
Yep.
paired with a population of people, 40%. Many don't know 40% of our market, both locally and nationally, own their home free and clear, and they struggle to figure out what they're going to do. So they're sticking in the house until we can figure out where to put them. And there's a need for a second home component to that we'll talk about in warm climates, because we are in a cold climate state. This all interrelates in my mind in terms of the infusion of housing that we need. And how do we break that nut? Like, what does that look like short and long term in your mind? It's all yours.
Yeah, that's a loaded question that
I
could go
know.
a lot of different directions.
I know.
Yes. Without question, average sale prices have remained elevated, and where they're at, as much as people predicted that they would come off of those highs, we haven't seen that occur. And the main reason we haven't seen it occur is, like you said, there is a lack of inventory for sale on the market. And what that means in particular is roughly about 1.2, 1.3 months of supply. So in other words, if no other inventory came onto the market,
Mhm.
it would take us about a 1.3 months to sell out our existing inventory,
Mhm.
sell out of it. So with that, that definitely speaks well for sellers and would-be sellers coming into the marketplace of getting close to their asking price, assuming the asking price fits with the market.
Right.
In terms of, what happens with that inventory, there's a lot of factors at play. One of the big ones to watch and continue to watch, I've been talking about that on our company-wide meeting, is in the commercial space, in particular multifamily housing.
Right.
And we will this year see the biggest influx of multifamily housing coming to the market
Mhm.
that we've seen since the 1970s. From everything, and the
Yeah.
people that follow and who research us extensively, we
Mhm.
haven't seen that kind of product coming online. And so you look at it and say, well, what does that mean for single family and those that want to own homes?
Mhm.
And potentially what that and how that could play out. One of the theories that we look at is, with all that inventory coming on, does that soften rental prices? And then do those developers look at it and say, maybe I'm better off converting these and putting these to for sale?
Right.
And hitting that for sale market. So I do look at that and say, okay, will we see some of that inventory, in particular for that first time home buyer in those price points? Do we see some, I see some potential opportunity there. Will the developers head that way? That's a big question mark of
Yeah.
whether they do, but there is a lot of inventory out there. It's a matter of whether it stays in the rental arena or if it moves and converts to for sale.
Interesting. Okay, so for those that don't really follow this, I'm picking up what you're putting down here. Do you feel like there was a huge consumption of inventory in our city that was captured in and is now kind of held in the whole rental leasing sphere that is one of the, shall I say, barriers to having housing availability opening up for our younger populace? That's the first question. What do you think about that? I mean, when did that start, in your opinion? Because I do feel that same energy, if you will. The shift happened over the last 10 years in terms of rental in our city.
I think, the whole, and this is true in our local market as well as nationally, the momentum of whether it's large consortiums or Wall Street
Right.
buying large tracts of land and doing rent to own, or individual investors who say, you know what, I want my current home, but I also want a portfolio. So I have 2, 3, maybe I've got 10 homes or doors, as some in that space will call it. And
Yeah.
that has picked up momentum. And really, we've seen that with the onset of technology and the ease in which I can now advertise my home for rent
Mm-hmm.
through different venues over the web. And so that's really what's helped that component take off. We all know that one of the biggest ways to build wealth is through real estate.
Yep.
So that continues to spur that one along. What we haven't done a great job of as an industry, and what's difficult to get in and around, is what percentage of the total housing stock out there and available, whether that's for sale or rent, how much of that is rental?
I
One
a curious
best,
number.
yeah, and one of the best stats I have seen, and that was a couple of years ago, Jim Bukta reported on it in the Star Tribune, roughly about 20%
Mm-hmm.
within Twin Cities housing area. Different areas that I go and I ask that question, whether it's city municipalities or the real estate or the real estate industry, those numbers fluctuate
Mm-hmm.
depending from community to community. But I would say we don't track that as an industry as well as we probably should,
I
to
agree.
understand that dynamic and how that, because that does have an impact
Mhm.
on housing prices overall.
So would you agree that our young populace, we'll call them millennial, there's like 3 different age groups. We'll say our 20 to 35-year-olds in this city. We're now seeing, in my mind, tell me if you disagree, an increased interest in ownership where
Mhm.
we didn't necessarily have that volume of interest for maybe about 8 years. I'm going to put an 8-year mark on it. And now there's a flux, like there's an increase. The multiple offer scenario right now at 500 or less is, especially in that 300 to 400 mark, is insanity to me. So I don't see that going away personally.
No, I don't either. And it's with each generation, experts quote will
Yeah.
talk about, they're maybe going to rent, they don't necessarily buy into the whole ownership component. And
Right.
I just don't. And we see it play out every generation, which is, yeah, 20 to maybe that 23, 24, and figuring out life and figuring out what I'm going to do. I'm back and forth between home.
Mm-hmm.
And there comes a point, and I think we call it maturity and a
Yeah.
little bit of age and wisdom. And
Yeah.
people, they do want to settle down and they do want to own a home. And I don't see that changing at all. In
Don't
fact,
either.
we're seeing it play out with the millennial group, and the percentages are high as far in terms of the numbers that want to own a home and are owning
Yeah.
homes.
I agree. So what do you think the driver is because for the interest of acquiring rental out there or having a rental portfolio, the construction happening, right? Multiple units being built in the city. Who's the audience for that in your mind? Is it a culmination of local and national? Is it relocation? Is it the young populace not willing to commit yet? Is it we have a population overflow right now and truly the housing inventory is not there, so they have no other options? What's your
I
take
think
on that? All
I
of it.
think it's all of the above, and I would also add a group of, 55 and over,
Me too.
say, I'm done with the big house. I don't want all the maintenance. I'm
Mm.
not quite sure what I want.
Mhm.
It's a great time to sell, so I'm gonna sell.
That's what
I'm
we're
gonna
doing.
Yep, I'm
Mhm.
gonna rent mentor, just sort of that midpoint, for
Mhm.
a while and see ultimately where I wanna land.
There's a huge piece of that out there, and I think personally that some of the builds happening right now, the new units being built are trying to accommodate those
Mhm.
people,
Yep,
because they really don't they want to have roots here. That's just the nature of our market.
mhm,
We're a market that's gonna stick around. We're also a seasonal market, and, you get to an age where you just do not wanna do January through March or April.
yeah.
So I think but then of course we've got a whole faction of people that don't really want a condo or a townhome. They still want one level living. And I think that category of housing is the most challenged in what I consider an older city with traditional housing in it. So how do you see that playing out? Because it's a huge need, one level living in the metro.
Yeah, one level is a huge component. It is
Yeah.
more challenging when you're in what I call landlocked. So in other words, there's nowhere else to build except for to go up and to
Hmm.
go vertical. And I don't see that changing. I think that continues to be the trend. And for, the options of doing one level townhomes, there's going to be more options as you go a little bit further out of that the primary, the two primary, Minneapolis, St. Paul, that first suburb, first
Hmm.
tier, and going a little further out. But in terms of both Minneapolis, St. Paul, and the suburbs that adjoin, really the option is going to be to go up and go
Hmm.
vertical.
So when you're sitting down with the builder association and you're looking at the projects happening in the city, do you have any sense of how many units are being built right now in the metro? Do you know what that number looks like?
I did, in terms of for sale, most of the vertical product that's going up right now is rental. It's
Mm-hmm.
multifamily, it's rental, it's not for sale.
Mm-hmm. And do you see
Uh,
that changing with the new guidelines that they've got where they'll be eventually converted to something that's a purchase?
right now, based on current guidelines, I don't see a
Mm-hmm.
immediate shift to conversions and for sale.
Mm-hmm.
My hope is that it will be looked at, and some of the conversations I'm having behind the scenes are, is there a way to facilitate? Is there, how can we look at a little more balance between what we've got in rental coming on and going for sale?
Right.
But currently, based on guidelines, I don't see an immediate change with that.
Mm-hmm. So, I work with team leaders all over the country, just like you're talking to your network all over the country. And I would say that there has been a cooling effect in some areas that we're not feeling. What do
Mhm.
you attribute that to?
The biggest reason for that is when we look at COVID and the boom during COVID, we saw a nice healthy increase as well. But the nice part about our area is that we don't see the high highs, but we also don't suffer those big lows.
Right.
So when you see some of those boom areas during COVID that really took off. And by
Yeah.
that, we're talking 50,
Massive,
70, 100% increases, which isn't
not
sustainable.
sustainable at all.
No, and I'm sure that's where the leads that you're talking to and networking with are coming from some of those geographic areas. And so
Mhm.
from a
They are.
health standpoint, we're in, I think, one of the best spots in the country
Too.
because we continue to see really nice and healthy appreciation. We don't see those big swings
I've
down.
always loved this market for that reason. It's not a bad thing to be steady as she goes.
Yeah.
That's a healthy place to be.
Boring is good.
And it's I don't want to say overly conservative market, but common sense market.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's easy to have a
Yep.
common sense conversation.
Yep.
And I do think it's one of the reasons we're attractive on paper, where they used to call us flyover country. I think there's an attraction to our water. I think
Mhm.
there's attraction to our schools,
Yeah.
we all have our challenges out there everywhere. I think our school systems are very strong and well operated. We have natural resources like no other, in my opinion. So as we become more of an attraction, how do we, a lot of people don't realize how wet we are in Minnesota. Like we are a heavy wetland state, and going up is a real thing because we don't have an abundance of land. You know, when you look at, I'm sure you've sat down with those building committees and they talk about what the future is 10 years, 20 years, 30 years out. When you sit down and listen to the forecast with an already lack of inventory to supply, do you see that ever really finding balance here? Is it always going to be a tug of war, in your opinion, or do you see that stabilizing at some point?
I think that there's a lot of interest out there to get it right, like you said. I mean, when I say my definition of boring, and that's a good thing, by the way, which is we do have a lot of healthy dynamics, and so we don't see these wild swings in different areas. And we've got a lot of people at the table talking because we do have great, excuse me, great resources.
Mm.
We've got very healthy, diverse business population, and that's important as far as the many different employers. You know, some areas are so dependent on one or two employers that if something fluctuates with that employer, it
Right.
has a huge impact. So we have all those things going for us, including, like you said, great land, things that we want to protect, our waters, all of that. And
Mm.
with all the players at the table and having these conversations, everybody has the same interests in mind. How we get there can be a little bit different.
Yeah, I
But
know.
but the conversations are being had, and they'll continue to be had because there are challenges. We've been talking about it, the inventory piece, and how do we solve for that.
Hmm.
And so, like I said, you know, what I would tell you is there's a lot of people interested in this topic, having the conversations around it, figuring out solutions, and everybody coming to the table with what their ideas and thoughts are. And that's how we continue to move forward.
I
Does it ever
agree.
reach, you know, complete equilibrium? I'm not sure that's ever
I don't think
possible.
that's ever possible,
No,
especially with the population growth happening. And yeah,
yeah.
I agree. So if you were in all of the coaching you're doing with the company and with the leaders within the company and all of the agents as part of, what are you most excited about over the next year as you're moving into planning for 2024? What are you super psyched about?
Sure. What I'm most excited about, and we talked about this at the very beginning, is we are back to more of a normal market. We're
Hmm.
not in this big swing that was so wild and unpredictable in terms of, you know, the number of offers or the amount of people and the amount of buyers, frankly, that were
Exhaustion.
coming in trying to get an offer. I mean, it would break my heart hearing about buyers that were out there with their fifth, sixth, you know, multiple offers that they were putting in and not getting that inventory. So what I
Yeah.
get excited about is really being able to service that segment
Hmm.
much better than we were able to do. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about the opportunity, like I said, to continue the conversation of how do we help bring on more inventory
Hmm.
for that segment. And where, you know, that goes back to our core mission as a company for the past 60 plus years, which
Right.
is, you know, the dream of home ownership and helping people to achieve that. And this is a market where we really thrive in doing that.
I love that. And that's a great segue, Sherry, to share with everybody because there are so many entries. Let's just talk about this for a minute. There are so many entries from the time when you and I got into this business in the late 90s to what we see today and the hundreds of players as part of our market. What I have most gratitude for is the collaboration and the power behind the partnership, the marketing, the vision, the knowledge of what we have to offer. It's deep rooted and powerful in the networking component because of the size. Especially during a time when we have a lack of inventory, a lot of people don't know, when you own that much of the market share, which is huge. We should talk about market share for a minute. I mean, we might as well put a Sharry Schmid plug in for Edina Realty because it's a powerful thing, more so than the clientele probably even realizes, because that's how they're leveling up and really able to achieve the outcomes they're looking for, whether they're buying or selling. So what do you want to share on that note?
We, like you said, and I'm proud of that history that we have of over 60 years in our local marketplace. So we are very much intertwined and intermingled. It's not some big national or international company
Mhm.
selling real estate. We are here, we're local, we understand, we know the players, we know the neighborhoods, we're entrenched in the neighborhoods street
Very
by
much
street.
so.
And that's the part that I really love and get excited about. It's what gets and keeps me motivated. I know it's what really keeps our agents interested and motivated because they're a part of the fabric.
Mhm.
This isn't about just selling a home. This is, like I said, it's that bigger, that dream of home ownership and all that comes with owning a home. And it's, let's face it, I mean, shelter is one of the key components that everybody needs in their life, and being part of making that happen, I,
I think
I
it's
get
so
excited
cool.
about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that the power of having a during, especially in our state, in our city, it's a very small, it's like a small town in a big city, right? That adage they always say. And when you're able to really dial in to an individual's wants and be able to have the backing and power of such a large machine of networking, it allows us individually to connect the dots for clients, whether it's their home or an investment or their lake property or their second home or their mom and dad, whatever it might be. The power behind that is massive, so powerful. And I just think that when you're looking at a market which is competing with small groups, and all of the requirements now as mandated about how we network information with each other, it's something to absolutely ask your friend or agent who plays in the Edina Realty family, because the backing behind that gives them a lot of leverage. That's the word I'll use. Lots of leverage.
Yep.
That.
Yep.
So, coming off of the last meeting, are there any shares to the community as a consumer that you think they should know moving into second quarter? Because our spring market is fully, fully engaged. Like we are in it right now. It's a busy time and we're still looking for inventory. So, what would you share with everybody?
The biggest thing I would share, playing off of what you just said, is there is inventory. As much as we've talked about a lack of inventory, there is inventory. And so reaching out and having that expert and that realtor to guide and move you forward is the first step in this whole journey. And the other thing I would say is that if you've been sitting on the sidelines waiting for that opportunity, when is that right opportunity? 100% now is the time to take advantage of
Completely.
the market, what's out there right now and what's available. Sitting back and waiting to time something, it's absolutely like you hear with the stock market. It's the worst thing you can do to try to time something. Again, shelter is one of the key critical components of our all of our lives, and holding on that because you're wondering about an interest rate, wondering about pricing, move forward. Now's the time to
Move
take advantage
forward.
and move forward. There's a lot of opportunities out there.
I agree with you. And most importantly, for the 40% of you out there that have been in your home for 10, 15, 20 plus years and you just don't know what to do, we have a solution for you. It's a temporary one, granted, but put your house out there and let a family, pass the baton and, start the adventure, because that will solve for some of the need we have for sure. So for those of you on the fence, this is a great time to talk for sure.
And I would add one more thing here, and those concerned about an interest rate. The thing to keep in mind is those don't have to be forever. In other words, if you come in, you're buying today, and interest rates drop, wonderful. You can go in and refinance at that time and take advantage of that lower interest rate. If interest rates go up,
Yeah,
uh,
I agree.
even better for you to have taken advantage of the interest rate today because you're locked in at that lower rate.
Absolutely. We always say, listen, it only can get better. It can't. So go ahead and just lock in, because if
Yep,
the refi opportunity comes, great for you. If it doesn't, you got a great house and you're going to enjoy it. So it's all good.
that's right.
It's all good. Sharry, it's always an honor to spend some time with you. Your
Likewise.
knowledge and your insight are invaluable, and the company's so lucky to have you.
Well, thank you, Carrie, and it's a
Mm.
pleasure working with you as well. So I appreciate the time this morning.
So Sharry Schmid, everybody, look her up, the president of Edina Realty. Always a pleasure, Sharry. Thank you so much for joining us again, everyone. We'll see you next time on Fly the Coop.